Right now, you are the only human species on Earth. That sentence sounds strange. It shouldn't. For almost all of human history, it wasn't true. You have never known anything else. Neither have your parents. Neither did their parents or theirs, going back thousands of generations. But rewind the clock just a little in the grand span of things, and the picture changes completely. You were not alone, not even close. 40,000 years ago, if you had stood on a hillside in what is now Europe, you might have seen smoke from two different kinds of campfires. One belonged to people who looked mostly like you. The other belonged to someone else entirely, shorter, heavier boned, built like a linebacker who had spent his whole life in the cold. He had a brain slightly larger than yours. He buried his dead. He may have worn jewelry. He was not an animal. He was a human being, just not your kind of human being. His name, the one we gave him long after he was gone, was Neanderthal. And he was not alone either. Elsewhere, in the caves of Siberia, there was another group genetically distinct enough that scientists needed a new name for them. They are called Denisovans, and we only know they existed because of a single finger bone and a tooth discovered in a cave in the Altai Mountains. On an island in Indonesia, a population of tiny humans, barely a meter tall, hunted pygmy elephants with stone tools. Scientists nicknamed them hobbits. Their real name is Homo floresiensis. In South Africa, deep inside a cave system so narrow that only the smallest researchers could crawl through it, another human relative was later discovered, Homo naledi, small-brained, strange-handed, and deliberately placing its dead in the deepest, darkest chamber of the cave, as if it understood something about death that we assumed only modern humans understood. At one point, scientists estimate at least 6 different human species walked the earth at the same time. 6, not 6 species of primates, 6 species of human, each one aware, each one tool-using, each one capable of forming bonds, raising children, and surviving winters that would kill you in a night. So here's the real question. What happened to them? Where did they go? You already know part of the answer, even if you have never thought about it directly. You are the answer. Somewhere in the tangled, brutal, and occasionally tender history of that overlap, every other human species disappeared, and you are what was left standing. For a long time, scientists assumed the story was simple. Homo sapiens showed up. Homo sapiens was smarter, faster, more adaptable. The others died out the way a better product eventually replaces the worst one on the shelf. Survival of the fittest, end of story. But the real story is far stranger and far more uncomfortable than that. In 2010, a team led by geneticist Svante Pääbo did something that would have sounded like science fiction a generation earlier. They sequenced the Neanderthal genome, pulling usable DNA out of bones tens of thousands of years old. And when they compared it to modern human DNA, they found something nobody expected. If your ancestry traces back to anywhere outside Africa, somewhere between 1 and 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal. Read that again. Somewhere between 1 and 4% of you might literally be Neanderthal. That means the two species did not simply compete and they met, they mixed. In some cases, they had children together, children who grew up and had children of their own, quietly folding one species into another until the line between us and them blurred into something that no longer made clean biological sense. Later research on Denisovan DNA found the same pattern in populations across Asia and Oceania, where some groups carry up to 6% Denisovan ancestry, genes that shape things as specific as immune response and the ability to tolerate low oxygen at high altitude, still active in people living in the Himalayas today. So the old story, the one where humans simply outcompeted and replaced everyone else, was too clean, too tidy. The truth is messier. You did not simply erase your relatives. You absorbed pieces of them. Their genes are still doing work inside living bodies right now, quietly helping fight off viruses, quietly adjusting how blood carries oxygen at altitude, quietly proving that the last humans who weren't alone never fully vanished. They just stopped being a separate thing. But interbreeding is not the whole story either. Something else was happening at the same time, something colder. Paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer, who has spent decades studying the fossil record of human origins, has pointed to a pattern that shows up again and again in the archaeology. Wherever Homo sapiens arrives in a new region, the local human population, whether Neanderthal, Denisovan, or something else, begins a slow decline within a few thousand years. not always through violence, sometimes through something quieter and more devastating, competition for the same resources, the same caves, the same herds of reindeer, the same limited stretches of fertile land during an ice age that was actively trying to kill everyone. Homo sapiens had certain advantages that mattered more than raw strength: longer range social networks, groups that could call on allies from 100 miles away when times got hard, more sophisticated projectile weapons, letting hunters kill from a distance instead of risking close combat with a cave bear or a mammoth, a wider, more flexible diet, and maybe, some researchers argue, a very slight edge in the sheer size of the social groups you could hold together at once, allowing knowledge and technology to spread faster between more people. None of those advantages sound dramatic on their own, but stretch them out over 10,000 years, layer them under repeated climate swings, add in disease exposure between populations that had never met before, and the outcome starts to look less like a single battle and more like a slow tightening. A vice closing gradually enough that no single generation would have called it an extinction. Each generation just would have noticed that there were fewer of the others around than there used to be, fewer campfires on the far hillside, fewer footprints in the snow that weren't your own. By around 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals were gone as a distinct population. The Denisovans faded not long after. Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of Flores, may have persisted until as recently as 50,000 years ago, astonishingly close to today on a geological timescale. Homo naledi's exact timeline is still being debated, but some estimates place its existence as recently as 230,000 years ago, meaning it may have overlapped with early Homo sapiens as well. One by one, the other branches went quiet, and you were the branch that kept growing. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. For roughly 99% of the time that human-like beings have existed on this planet, there was more than one kind of human. Multiple species, multiple ways of being human, coexisting, competing, sometimes mating, sometimes fighting, sometimes simply avoiding each other across a shared landscape. The idea that human means one single unified species is actually the anomaly. It is the exception, not the rule. You are living inside a strange, narrow window of history where, for the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, there is only one kind of us. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham has argued that the qualities which let Homo sapiens outlast its relatives were not really about brute intelligence or brawn at all. They were about cooperation, about the ability to trust strangers, form alliances beyond the immediate family group, and coordinate at a scale that no other human species quite matched. In other words, the trait that may have determined who survived was not who could fight the hardest. It was who could get along with the most people, which brings the whole story a little too close to home. Because right now, today, you are still running on hardware built during that exact competition. Your instinct to instantly sort people into us and them, your discomfort around strangers from an unfamiliar group, your deep, almost irrational comfort around a shared campfire, a shared meal, a shared language. None of that came from nowhere. It came from tens of thousands of years spent in a world where the wrong group of them over the next hill could mean the difference between your family eating this winter or starving. The instincts that help decide which human species got to keep existing are the same instincts quietly steering how you react to a crowded subway car, a new coworker, or a stranger's accent. You carry the outcome of that competition in two ways: in your genome, where fragments of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA still sit, doing small, quiet jobs inside your cells, and in your behavior, where the social instincts that helped your ancestors' group win out are still firing every single day, usually without you noticing. So the next time you feel that flicker of unease around someone unfamiliar, or that instant warmth around someone who feels like your kind of people, it might be worth asking where that feeling actually came from. It is older than your culture, older than your country, older, in fact, than your species being the only one left standing, because you were not always alone, and somewhere inside you, a part of you still hasn't quite forgotten what it felt like to share this planet with someone else who could look up at the same fire and call themselves human too.